so the talk has changed slightly, but the idea will still be very similar on participatory video. And I just want to say, Zoe and Nick are working on an ESRC-funded project in Dev that's led by Adrian here, and Yokinye, sitting next to him, and myself, Nicole, are involved in this project looking at conservation markets and justice. And so we're employing a component of participatory video in our research and have brought on board Zoe, who works in conjunction with Insightshare, to help us do that. So without further ado, Zoe Young is a freelance cinematographer, and she's been working with Insightshare for how long?
Well, I first trained with them in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a while.
Yeah.
So Zoe, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. And it's always funny to hear myself referred to as a cinematographer, because not that long ago I was a postgrad student, perhaps a lot like you, working on environmental politics and finance. And as part of that research, I ended up using video. And that's kind of the story that I will tell today as to how I came to be working in participatory video in particular, and the journey that led to that, and what value I think it has for researchers working in this field of development, environment, and questions of justice that we're going to be exploring in this amazing new project, which I feel really excited and honoured to be part of, because we've been having a meeting today and it's looking really good. Participatory video is something that Nick and Chris Lunch are experts in, and I'm sorry I'm neither of them. Nick's got the flu, but you can watch Chris Lunch do a TED talk about participatory video, so you'll hear it a bit more from the horse's mouth, because they've been working in this for 20 years and they have a lot to say and a lot more experience than I do. But it's a way of using video in a bottom-up way to empower people who may be illiterate, may be completely disadvantaged, marginalized, to express themselves, to work together to produce a documentary in essence. It may be small, it may be rough, but it is in essence a film which they have shot, edited, and put out into the world, expressing their point of view. So as a tool, participatory video is accessible, democratic, it's open-ended, it's empowering for people who may be completely systematically disempowered, and it challenges general balances of power in media and in development. So in that sense, it's actually quite difficult. And the processes take a lot of expertise and skill to manage well, but the technical aspect is kind of easy. I mean, everyone's got a camera in their phone now. You just point and shoot, and working with your friends, you know how much more accessible the video may be if you're shooting it yourself than if some big team from the BBC has come in, and how alienating that can be. So the core of it is peers filming each other and sharing their stories together. So to share my story, I was a researcher working in environmental finance, and we made a documentary of our research because it felt bottom up in the wrong way to be purely going to communities who were living very difficult lives often, taking our findings and then sharing them in rarefied elite situations such as conferences, journals. And when somebody suggested making a documentary, I thought that's a really interesting idea, because we could take this publicly funded research into a publicly funded environmental fund and give it to the public much more widely. So we made a documentary called Suits and Savages, which you can watch online, and I'm going to show you a little part of it here, which kind of captures the core of, oh God, go away. Does it just play? Play.
The Earth gives us a rich supply of natural resources, each one of them nurturing life in all its majesty. But we are in danger of destroying this precious mosaic.
Poverty forces millions to overexploit nature, while ನಂತರ ಕಾಡಿನ ಸಿಗಲು ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀರ ಇಂದು ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜವಾಗಿ ಅದೇ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅದು ಜೀವಮಾನ ಸರಿಯಾದ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳವಣಿಗೆ ಇದು ಅವರು ನಾಟಕ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಅದು ನೀವು ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ಕಾಡೊಳಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಲ್ತಾನ ಆಗಿರೋ ತೀರ ನಾವು ಕಲ್ಕೋತೀವಲ್ಲ ಕಾಡೊಳಗೆ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಆಗದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಗಿರಿಜನರು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮಂತ ಬಡವ್ರನ್ನ ನೀವು ಓಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು.
I got embroiled in that debate, trying to defend the bank, get the facts on the table, consultation, negotiation, hopefully reaching agreement and then implementing a collaborative way of managing these natural resources.
ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಕಾಡಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬದುಕಂತ ಜನ ನಮಗೆ ಒತ್ತಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಲ್ಲ, ನೀವು ಕಾಡು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಬನ್ನಿ ಅಂದಾಗ ಯಾವುದೇ ಹಣ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಮನೆಯ ಸಾಕಣೆ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಯಾವುದೇ ಒತ್ತಾಯ
ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ದಾಟಲ್ಲ. ನಮ್ದು ಎಂತೆ ಕೊಲೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ನಾವು ಈ ಬೆಳ್ಳದಾಚೆ ದಾಟದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು ಕಾಲೇಜ್ನವರು ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಒಂದೇ ಆಗಿ ಇದ್ರೆ ಕಾಡನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು, ಕಾಡನ್ನು ಬೆಳೆಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. ಅದೇ ಬೇಕು, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಆ ರೂಢಿ ಬೇಕು ಅಷ್ಟು. ಯಾಕೆ
Well, I think there's a genuine, very heartfelt need on the part of the people featured in the video here to work with their local authorities, their forest department, in collaborative ways to better manage the forest resources.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬದಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಇವರು ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಂಥ ಹಿಂದೆ ಭಾರಿ ತುಂಬ ಹಿಂಸೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಹಿಂಸೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಪಟ್ಟ ವಿಚಾರ ಸರಿಪಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಈಗ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಈ ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ ಇದು ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ಅವ್ರ ಕಷ್ಟ ಹಿಂಗಿದೆ ನೋಡಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇಡೀ ಸರ್ಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಇವರಂತ ಸಹಕಾರದಿಂದ ಈಗ ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಹಿಂಸೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿದೆ.
ಇದೇ ತರ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ತಂದೆ ತಾಯಿಗಳು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಹೋಗಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಓಡಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಹೋಗಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಯಾವ ಕಾರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಓಡಿಸ್ತೀರಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಮರಳಿ ಕೇಳೋಕ್ಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇಲ್ದೋದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ತಲೆ ಮಿದಿಲಿಂದ ನಾವು ಅಷ್ಟಾದ್ರೂ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಓಡಿಸಿ ನಾವಿಲ್ಲಿ ಜೀವನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು. ಆಗ ಈಗೀಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ಈಗೇನೆ ಬಂದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕಂಪ್ನಿ ಸೇರಿಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ಸಂಘ ಕಟ್ಟಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಬಂದು ಈಗ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಶಾಲೆ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಓದ್ತಿರೋದು.
ಕೋಟಿ ಹಣ ತೆಗೆದು ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಜಮೀನಿ ಮನೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಕಾಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲೀನಾಗಿ ಕೆರೆಗೆಲ್ಲ ಕಟ್ಟಿಸಿ ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳು ನೀರು ಕುಡಿಯಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಇರೋದು ಕೆರೆಗಳು ಕಟ್ಟಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ನೆಮ್ಮದಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು, ಕಾಡು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು. ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಬಜೆಟ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಕೇಳೋ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಅದೊಂದು ಏನು ಪ್ರಯೋಜನ, ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಏನು ಅದೊಂದು ಏನು
So that's just a taste from a film, but the core of the film, as you see there, is we took a video from Washington about this fund, showed it in the forest, and the people there said, what? And then we took a video from them about what was important to them and showed it in Washington. And then when we'd finished the film, we took it back to the forest and showed it to the people who we'd filmed there. And they had they loved it. They loved to see their faces, and they thought that their concerns had made it to Washington and internationally and to University of East Anglia. But they were also saying, but you got this wrong, and why didn't you show that about this tribe had that problem there? And I was terribly apologetic, I'm really sorry. We were making a film about this fund, and you were just sort of bit part in this big story. We just, wanted to show your point of view, but we were academics and we had this funding and we had to tell this story about our research. So after that whole process, and then after I went back 5 years later to see what had changed, and I saw that the video had made some difference, but that they were still wanting to tell their story, and they were still saying, but nobody listens to us. And they were still the people who knew what was really going on in that forest. And so that's what got me thinking. Maybe there was a way that it could have been better than we could have done it with all the best will in the world. That there could have been a way that they could have been the people making the film, saying how it looked for them because they were the ones in the forest who lived with the tiger and also saw who was killing the tiger, and which were often the same people as were wanting them out of the way because of various politics and racism that goes on within their society. So when I heard about this idea of participatory video, of giving the camera to the community and working with them to help them tell the story, I thought, yeah, that's what we should have done for this film. How much more powerful would development, eco-development as they wanted there, be if people were enabled to flower for themselves, to communicate for themselves? And it might not be the broadcasting that we were kind of aiming for with this documentary, to tell a big story to a big world. It might just be really narrow casting. It might be the voice of this village to that government department, who maybe wouldn't go to that village or wouldn't listen to the people from that village if they came, because they're people without shoes, they're people from a different caste or class of society. So if we can come in as outsiders and facilitate this communication, I thought this is real research on the first part, and 2, real development. And I'm adapting this talk and that clip from a talk I gave to the United Nations a couple of years ago on the right to development. They were having a social forum there. And the right to development involves the active, free and meaningful participation of all people in their own development. So active, free and meaningful means telling their own stories, not having somebody else come in and say, this is what you need, this is what you want. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where somebody's thought they know what's best for us, and all too often it's really not. Which is why we have now this idea of free, prior, informed consent before anybody is moved out of their land, before projects are brought in to the lands of indigenous people. But how do you get that consent when you have a community who may be illiterate, who are not listened to systematically by the government? Participatory video is an incredible tool to enable that, because what you do, you go into a community with the video camera and you give it to a person who you're working with in this group, and after that you don't hold it again. They sit in a circle and each person in the circle films the person across from them, and then you have this idea of each one teach one. So you've taught them to use the video, then they teach the person next to them, and they film the person sitting opposite them. It's just saying, hello, my name's so-and-so, and I've come here because of this. So the camera goes all the way around the circle, by which time everyone has appeared on camera and everyone has used the camera. So then you will watch it back, and so you're learning by doing, and each person is able to say, oh God, I look terrible, or oh, my shot's all over the place, I cut the top of their head off, and you all learn together. And then there's a whole array of other tools that you use, and then you use some of the action research tools, participatory rural appraisal research tools, where you map local situations, people play games together, and the group who are working together begin to work out what are their common concerns, what are the issues they would like to make the video about. And then you help them to storyboard it, work out who speaks well, work out where they might want to film, if they're mapping the local area, where they might want to go and shoot, some footage to include in the film. And each day after you've done some shooting, you screen the footage back to the participants in the workshops, and perhaps their friends and family, the rest of the community who's been working in the fields all day. Quite often it's quite hard for people to find time spare for this kind of work if you're living at a very impoverished level. So then everybody comes together in the evening and they watch the video, and you can tell then which bits are working and which bits aren't. And from that you build up, and working with the community, you edit down a little film, which you then have, and you can put it on YouTube. You can go and show it to the local government who are causing a problem, or you can give it to a funder who wants to know what's needed in this area, or you can use it as part of your research tool, as we're hoping to do with this project. So that's the kind of core of it, and I think it's relevant to say this is a development department, and the roots of the word development means unfolding. And this is a way of enabling the participants in the process to unfold what they are needing, what their family are needing, what their community is needing, and so that they can then define what development means for them. what environmental protection would mean for them, what their values are, what their needs are. And now that the tools are becoming so much more accessible, that we all have a little video camera in our pocket, and that this training is spreading and spreading. Insightshare have been working since the early 90s. This idea of participatory video was actually initiated in the 60s in Newfoundland, I think, in Canada. An ethnographer suddenly he was working with fishermen, I think, on an island off Canada. And people are taking it in all kinds of different directions, working with substance abusers, working with shanty town dwellers to work out what their housing needs are. Insightshare is based in Oxford, and it emerged out of Nick Lunch went to Nepal and was looking at how the people were living there and comparing it and contrasting to how the youth in Oxford were living. And so he enabled an exchange between young people, teenagers in Nepal and in East Oxford. And so the exchange element, the video letters or using the videos in seeking accountability is a very powerful use of it. But in a way, even more powerful is just to reflect back to a community, to enable them to present themselves and to see themselves through their own eyes, through a sort of a shared representation of what their concerns are. And so that I think is the power of it. And it can go in many different directions, as I say. And I think the power of it is quite important as well, because as we know to our cost, many disadvantaged, marginalised communities end up picking up guns because they're so frustrated and shooting with guns. So how much better that they should be picking up cameras and shooting with cameras. And if we, as people working in our research and development, can facilitate that and not just be taking our findings from the bottom up and then keeping them here in these rarefied circles, but also giving back while we're doing this, how much better a world we might all be living in. So I'll throw it open to you now. Oh, I'd like to show you one little participatory video actually before I do that, which I think begins to show where it can go. It's just a sneak preview of a 15-minute video made by people in the Solomon Islands, which they were charged with coming up with an environmental and development plan for their region. And as part of that, they used participatory video. And I'd urge you to watch the full 15 minutes version because it's just beautifully done, I think.
Landana say him maradlumiya when taking what something for him the crime and helping for at the same time too by helping with the future generation me. So let me good for him concerning now over the areas where in Garablosi and along land. And now I know the future generation will be to come. And we start something inside the forest, initially using.
Seperti longi kapal kam damnensim kam spoiler of the resource belum forest belum ni or by the sapadao.
That's for film by looking. All the man in the middle of Chivoko now are working. Chivoko is one for small village for northwest choice of Solomon Islands. All the attending one for participate in the video workshop. All the learning some of basic skills, how to work in movie. One by you looking mere skills for what learning and how they using for talent story going on.
Ay banyak takamo jadi, ini kan pada mah bungal bata. Takabon jadi dia pada mah.
Before ya, settle pisah. Before that just take him low. Kota set mangrove, motor no kopara will see. But this time, usim fish barak kam, usim kam short na. Kota man like taking fish, usim ta barak kopara will deep sea na.
So simi kalau spoiler this time, oh sorry lo kita. Bikin ini biar ini wala na. Banyak nung garim fish, banyak nung kakai fish semua usem. So, yang baru input na kung wala konsep na ari belum wala.
Lo heria mi stand up lo hemia hemna en be lo evalo Chivoko. So mi fola no tachi, mi fola no salga fishing anymore. Long this wala area. And this time mi fola looking, everything em ga come back moi.
Video belong to the story belong to or the light for sharing with other communities, or even protecting and managing with marine and forest resource community.
So yeah, I'd like to throw it open to you all.
Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions for Isha? Did you work at the Solomon Island?
No, wish I had.
The other one, how long did you spend in the communities? Like, how long, first of all, in total, like, your stay there, and also, like, how long training to like, all the workshops?
Well, the film that I showed you, the excerpt out of Soups and Savages, that wasn't a participatory video. That we just made a video letter, and that was a rush job. That was the way that most researchers work. You have very limited time and so forth, so you just go in, find somebody, shoot them, get some shots, stick it together, and go away again. We went back with the film and screened it to them, and then I went again 5 years later. Each time I could only spend up to a week there. To do proper participatory video, you want minimum 10 days, 2 weeks, really. If you can keep coming back, building capacity, and really working with the community, then all the better. You know, the more time you can spend, the better. Time and patience and humility are the greatest investments you can make there, a lot more than money in a way.
Do you think introducing participatory video or other aspects of technology to traditional communities like Insightshare could have any sort of detrimental effect to traditional knowledge aspects that might be there? And the reason I ask this is because, in my experience, introducing mobile phone technology to civic communities undermines some of the existing sort of hierarchies of knowledge. So whereas previously a chief or a headman would be the narrator of the custodian of any knowledge, when mobile technology proliferates in these communities, you find that younger people no longer listen to the traditional source of knowledge. So do you think there's any danger of introducing them?
I think that's happening anyway. As you say, you know, technology is doing its thing and coming in through lots of different ways. Some positive, some negative, some a bit mixture of both. I think depending how this is handled, I think it can definitely be beneficial to revalorizing traditional knowledge. Because you can, I mean, the community makes their decision who they're going to interview and whose points of view and stories they're going to put down for posterity and for sharing. But also, if they see that people are coming in from outside and want to hear traditional stories rather than just want them to buy cigarettes or whatever it might be, then it can kind of, create a different perspective there. So I think it's happening anyway, and this is a way of doing it in a considered way, and there's a lot of ethical and procedural things to consider. And obviously each community is different. Each community has their stories and their situation and their, But it is a democratizing force in some senses, depending who's got the technology.
What are some of the ways or methods which you have used to engage sort of within every community? There are sort of those hidden communities, so it can be women, it can be young people, and among those young people it may be young girls and that kind of thing. So what are some of the ways which you have engaged so that they can participate rather than other people speak on their behalf?
That's a very key key question, and because you often you want to work with local groups, with existing governance structures. You don't want to come in and start something new, but you don't know what hidden dynamics are there, or less hidden dynamics if suddenly it's all the older guys are talking. So the way Insightshare works, quite often they will end up having separate filming going on for a men's group and a women's group, and that creates a kind of almost a fun kind of dynamic, and you get to see different aspects of the culture through the men's eyes or through the women's eyes. There's specific projects for young girls or for disabled people, or I mean you can come in with those eyes to be looking out for the structural injustice that's there and working out ways to deal with that. But I mean, you can't get away from it completely. There's always going to be some sort of somebody left out inevitably. I mean, whether it's only who's got time to come and participate, and sometimes you do have to enable people to participate, well, offering childcare or providing food for them so that they don't have to keep going fishing each day or whatever it might be.
Supposing you do decide that you can't have a single set of filming with men and women because of local culture, so you have a camera with the men and a camera with the women. Would you then make two separate films, or would you somehow sort of get people to knit those together?
I think either are an option. I've not myself been in that situation, so I can't speak, but yeah. I'll defer to the experts on that one. Sometimes it's nice you could edit them together, so you could go from the men's to the women's. I've seen that in films that other people have made. You can get them almost making comments on each other's ways of being in the community and so forth. If at all possible, yeah. And there are techniques for participatory editing. I mean, as far as possible, you only shoot what you're going to use, but inevitably you end up having to cut some bits out. So ideally you would do that with the key participants there, and then showing rough cuts back to the wider group to get their approval. And translation as well can be a major issue, because especially when it's between, say, an indigenous language and a more culturally dominant language, and concepts may translate very differently. And so to sit and to do that process of the translation and then the editing, making sure you've cut things in the right place, you've got a whole story rather than just the part that only makes sense to you as an outside editor, and that sort of thing.
So what is the longest part of the process? Is it filming? Is it the editing? Or is it the translation?
The longest part is actually the preparation. The processes of beginning to work together, to working out what you want to be filming, to distilling the core of the issues that you want to be expressing. Then the filming ideally should be quite short. Then the editing, if you've filmed well, the editing shouldn't take too long, but yeah, it's worth putting the time in there to make sure you've really told the story as it's intended and you're not really upsetting anybody.
I was going to say, so is ethical clearance a big issue and sending, etc.? Is that being run into preparation?
Yeah, that's a key part of the workshopping to begin with, is to getting agreement of everybody there, that everybody will treat each other with respect, that they all know what they're getting involved in, if there are any ethical implications of people saying certain things in certain contexts, involvement of children and so forth. And because sometimes the situations can be a little bit difficult, if there's inter-ethnic strife, there's land rights issues, there's a big company in there, the military's involved. Sometimes these situations can be a bit itchy, so everyone needs to be on the same page as to what they're doing and what the implications are. Any of you going to use participatory video?
Well, I'm interested in photography, and it's one of the things that I've done a bit of, but that is just using either my simple phone or that kind of thing. So it's something I'm going to be involved in quite a lot. And it was fascinating in the stuff we
Yeah. I think that's really, really important. I mean, it just builds resentment, and even on a self-interested level as researchers, if you want to carry on doing research, you need your raw material to be friendly and to feel like you're, working with them, not just trying to get something out of them. And if you end up in a situation where people will only collaborate with you if you pay them or something, or you have to persuade them each time that you're not just another of these people coming in from outside and trying to get a career out of their problem. You're going in a good direction if you at least offer that reflection back to them, that they learn from the work you've done as well. I mean, there's a user, you have to feed back to your users now, don't you, to get funding for the ESRC and things. But quite often that's perceived as being, your peers in the developed world. But to me, it's just as much your people at the bottom end of things as well. So anyway. Oh, in the Chivoko case. Oh, I don't know the details of that. I wish I did. I can put you in touch with the local guy if you like, because he came to Geneva to talk to the United Nations about all this a couple of years ago. It was really great to have him there. And yeah, they were so excited about this, that not only being able to manage their own resources, but also to be able to tell the world about it and come to the United Nations. But all these things depend on ongoing connections and on funding, which is why I'm serious. If you're interested, they would love to be able to keep in touch with people in a department like this and to follow up. So come to me afterwards and I'll get you.
I just wanted to add actually a response about the question about sort of giving back and returning, because this is part of the discussion we've been having earlier today in a way. We're planning to use participatory video as a research method, which itself is sort of quite extractive in a way, that we want to use it as a way of going into communities and find out, how they think about certain issues, because that then helps us. So we've been sort of thinking about, well, how do we then sort of combine that with, what is the sort of more fundamental ethos we think of participatory video. It's about giving something to the community and supporting the community in being able to have its own voice and to go to forums such as the United Nations in Geneva or wherever it might be, the narrow casting you were talking about. So that's one of the challenges we face in a way, how we balance that. I don't think we have a particular answer at the moment, but I think, did you want to say, in Venezuela, you actually, there's demand for these methods from the community in terms of feeding back to life plans, something like that?
Well, the thing is that I find it that it's very different to do participatory video just for the product of video, to use participatory video as part of a long-term relationship and long-term research process, which is the way I have been involved. So if participatory video is part of a long-term research process, you don't have the concerns about feeding back, because it's just a natural process of the research. You have to feed back because it's part of the next stage of the research. It is an ongoing relationship, which is in a way a much fairer way and a more level way of working, because it doesn't mean that you just go for one time, do the participatory video, hope that the participatory video creates everything that you want it to be in just 15 days, and then you're out, and then you never come back. You still have that sensation that it's never going to be a sort of a horizontal relationship. Whereas if the participatory video is part of a long-term research process, which involves many other things, and you use this as a tool to document different things that stay with the community, that allow the community to have voices throughout many different aspects of our research, then that feeding back becomes, and the extraction, you deal with that because it's just not extractive anymore. is you're defining agendas together, you agree products together, you agree. We as researchers have the obligation to write articles. This is part of what we do. We are paid because if we produce scientific articles, but we also want to produce community products with you. So it's part of the negotiation process between researchers and community members now on defining research agendas to have a variety of products. Some more research-oriented, traditional research-oriented, and others more community-oriented. So I think that takes away a lot of the pressures of feeling this extractive tradition that we as researchers have when the whole conception of knowledge production changes.
Yeah.
And it becomes a much more social concerned knowledge production system.
Yeah.
But you can only do that if you have a long-term process in a specific site.
Yeah.
If you're just going for a PhD or a master's course, a master's thesis, or 2-year research process, then of course you have that horrible tension of how do you guarantee that participatory research will be just.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think this is really key. I think if you have the opportunity to keep working together, then that is obviously best. But from my experience of going back to that forest in India with the film, and the delight on everyone's faces, they didn't even want to watch the film, half of them. They just wanted to have it in their hands and to know that there was a film and that someone had made the effort to come to them and say, here's the film. Because they'd had various people coming through this site, it was a contested site, and doing their research there. They'd had journalists coming in and then writing in a language that they didn't understand and never bothering to translate it or send it back to them. And just their delight that we were there and had given them a film. And now that's 100 times easier than it was 10, 15 years ago when we did that. Because, we had to produce a dubbed VHS and it was all really complicated. Whereas now with the internet, and you can just send video online, and you can find these international communities of translators who want to contribute to this sort of thing and practice their translations on something which is for a good cause. And you could probably, if you decided that's what you were going to do, you could quite easily send something back and the people would feel happy and they would get a chance to see it. And you don't even have to go back yourself, I think, now. And I think it's a lot easier, even if you don't have a lot of resources or time.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Zoe. That's great.
Thank you. Good.